A very good morning to you. There are new concerns. The final stage of the government's roadmap out of lockdown on June the 21st could be under threat. It comes after cases of the India variant of COVID-19 in England doubled in the last week. Now, hospitality leaders have told Sky News they fear more businesses could go bust if they aren't allowed to fully open next month. Our political correspondent, Joe Pike, reports.
In less than a month, theatres should be full again. Restaurants at capacity, with social distancing scrapped. But with restrictions due to be lifted, COVID cases are on the rise. And the final step in Boris Johnson's roadmap is now in doubt.
I think it is really just on the cusp at the moment.
And all because the Indian variant is spreading.
The latest estimates are that more than half and potentially as many as 3/4 of all new cases are now of this variant.
It's the arts, entertainment, sport and hospitality sectors that are desperate for stage 4 of England's route out of lockdown to go ahead next month on time, because for now, theatres, concert halls, sports venues and restaurants are not at full capacity. And that means many of them are not profitable.
With the table service and social distancing, which is the biggest challenge that we have out there, is there is no viability. There are very few breaking even.
And what is your message to the government?
We need to open on the 21st. It's key. It's very important. The government needs to understand that economically, but we also need to understand that we need to open safely. And we believe as an industry we can do that.
But in Bolton, England's worst affected area, some are concerned.
I think everything needs to be shut, apart from the food things, because we need that. But there's so many things that's open and so many things like work and everything.
They should put restrictions, I think, but just local restrictions rather than, like nationwide or whatever.
I wouldn't say impose like a local lockdown, but maybe some more like tighter restrictions could probably help.
People in Bolton don't really care, but which is quite upsetting to see.
For now, reopening plans continue, while those in government argue we'll need to see the data before we're sure of the date. Joe Pike, Sky News in London's West End.
Now, the latest coronavirus data shows there have been 3,542 new cases in the last 24 hours. That's the highest since March the 30th. 10 more deaths have been reported, which means the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test is now 127,758. Meanwhile, another 236,119 people have had their first vaccination. 427,458 have had their second. So just over 24 million people in the UK have now had both doses. And let's talk to the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. Look, when we look at the India variant, when we look at the cases rising to the highest levels since the end of March, how concerned is the government?
I think we're very attentive to the data, and we don't want to proceed with the roadmap without considering all the information that we have. I think that the numbers of cases is a matter of concern, but what does give me some confidence is the fact that the vaccine seems to be working, and as your report said, we've had millions, I think 60 million jabs have been administered, something like 24 million have received both jabs, and I think the effectiveness of the vaccine is what I think is what can give us some confidence that we can reopen on the 21st of June.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem seems to be, doesn't it, that of course, 24 million people having both jabs is not enough. There is some vaccine hesitancy, certainly in some of the cases we're seeing hospitalised from the India variant. I mean, might it be sensible to delay things until that double vaccination figure is considerably higher?
Well, as you know, Stephen, people are being vaccinated every day, and those numbers are going up considerably. And also, the other thing that's very helpful and encouraging is the fact that the numbers of hospitalizations and the number of fatalities as well is considerably lower than it was even just 2 months ago. So obviously there's lots of facts that we have to consider. I, as Business Secretary, am very committed to try to reopen on the 21st of June. I can't guarantee that, And as I've said, we're looking at the data every day.
I mean, look, as Dominic Cummings laid out the other day, as he said, there's a choice between locking down early or letting the virus spread. Now, his implication was that we didn't lock down early enough when it came to the Kent variant, and it spread like wildfire. Now, there is, you know, it's not about scaremongering here. It is a very legitimate concern that the India variant could spread like wildfire, you know, across those who are not vaccinated for whatever reason. I mean, do you think the Prime Minister could, and government as a whole, the collective cabinet responsibility, could err on the side of caution this time round?
Well, Stephen, as I've said, we're looking at the data. Today's the 28th of May. It's impossible for anyone to know what the situation will be like in a week or 2 weeks' time. And as far as I'm concerned, we'll be looking at the data. We've said repeatedly that we won't make a final decision about the 21st of June until the 14th of June, a week before the established date. So I can't guarantee one thing or the other now. I think we just have to look at the data. We've got to be patient. We've got to be very vigilant. People also have to be sensible and observe all the guidelines in terms of face mask wearing, social distancing. And we can't make any call one way or the other today, unfortunately.
Well, no, but I mean, obviously, you're well aware, more than most, about the pressures, particularly from small businesses at the moment, who are saying it's absolutely essential that they open on the 21st. And obviously, these businesses, to get staff rehired, to get things up and running, to get supplies in, particularly in hospitality, you know, they're going to want as much notice as possible. Now, I appreciate it puts you in it puts the whole government in a very difficult position. You want some people wanting answers now. You also want to leave the data till as late as possible. How do you win here?
It's a very difficult situation, as you know. The whole point about the roadmap was that it would give 5-week intervals by which we could gradually reopen the economy. And the roadmap was set out in February. And we were very careful about the future dates. And the whole point about the 5 weeks, Stephen, was that we would look at the data. The Prime Minister said very clearly that during those 5 weeks we would look and see how hospitalisation rates were affected, how infection rates were moving, and what the degree of the demand, the challenge was, the safety. There's always a risk element here. And so the hospitality leaders, business leaders I've spoken to, are very clear. They find it frustrating. They want to get open and up and running again. But they do understand that we have to do it in a safe way, and we have to look at the science, scientific evidence. We have to look at the data, and that we shouldn't be rushing to quick and easy conclusions. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're avoiding. We're actually looking at the data. We're trying to do this in a very safe, measured way. And as I've said, on the 14th of June, we will have a decision one way or the other as to whether we can reopen on the 21st.
I mean, look, everybody understands you can't please all the people all the time. Whatever is decided, there are going to be people who are unhappy with the decision. Is it fair to say that you are looking at all options here? Because there's going to be certainly a number of businesses that would say if the India variant is prevalent in certain hotspots, certain parts of the country, why can't they be, as unfortunate as it would be for them, can't they be locked down while the rest of the country is allowed to reopen? Is that something government is actively considering?
Looking at all options, but what I can't do, I wish I could do this, but on the 28th of May, that is today, I can't tell you what the Indian variant will look like on the 21st of June.
No,
I can't
I'm not
tell
asking.
You what
I mean, forgive me. I mean, with that question, I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to answer whether or not, you know, something like that could be a possibility to try and keep as many people as possible happy.
All I would say to that is that, repeat what I've said before, we're looking at the data, we want to reopen on the 21st of June, and we're trying to get to that outcome. But if the data suggests that it would be unsafe to do that, we may well follow that. We would follow that.
OK, look, can I ask you about care homes? Obviously, it's been a big topic of discussion. I mean, Matt Hancock yesterday saying he didn't lie about that situation, he didn't mislead anyone, but obviously there was wanting to get people tested out of hospital and into care homes, but there was a testing issue at the time, which meant it wasn't always possible. But the result of that was devastating. Was it wrong to say? I mean, they used that phrase about having a protective ring about care homes. I mean, that in effect wasn't right, was it?
I think what Matt stressed very carefully yesterday was that he was absolutely focused right from the start of the pandemic on saving people's lives. He was in a difficult situation as the health secretary in a pandemic, the like of which we hadn't seen for 100 years. He was under huge pressure. And as a cabinet colleague, I know that he worked really hard. Very few people, if anyone, worked as hard as he did. And he was very committed to saving lives. Now, he said what he said. I fully believe him, but we'll have an inquiry, and that will iron out all these facts.
Just sticking to the business theme, if I can, I know you're very keen to get small businesses as they try to fight back from all of this. You're very keen for them to go greener, to cut their carbon emissions. Now, they've got so many pressures on them at the moment. As far as I can see, you're not providing any extra money to help them out to become greener. So, I mean, what realistically can you expect them to do?
Stephen, what's really been surprising to me, and I've been really impressed by, is the fact that lots and lots of businesses want to go greener, not only larger businesses who are committing to the UN race to zero in large numbers, but also smaller businesses are really wanting to learn more about what they can do to fight against climate change. And actually, I'm feeling and seeing a huge responsiveness from small business leaders, people, as you say, who are under a lot of pressure at the moment, but they really want to help on the green agenda, and that's why we're launching this campaign. I think it's something that people are really responding to.
Look, can we just finish off with, I mean, I know, you will not be someone who agrees with the sentiment that migrants are a poison, are you? But those were the words of the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, who's visiting the UK and seeing the Prime Minister today. The Labour Party says entertaining him when we've seen what he says on these issues, and some of it is horrendous, that it absolutely undermines the values that the UK stands for and holds dear. So why is that meeting taking place?
So you'll know, Stephen, that as a leader, as politicians, people in cabinet, people in responsibility, we have to speak to all sorts of people, all sorts of leaders across the world whose values we don't necessarily share. I think Viktor Orbán's views on migrants are things that I would not endorse in any way. Having said that, I think that we have to engage with the EU. He's an EU leader. Hungary is an EU country. We were part of the EU. And in this post-Brexit world, I think it's absolutely right for us to be building bilateral relations with countries in the former EU. I think it's completely reasonable to do that. And not to do so, I think, would be irresponsible. So it's a diplomatic relationship that we want to develop. We want to talk to European leaders, and I think it's absolutely right that the Prime Minister does that.
Minister, it's good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, if you're thinking about that green business initiative that the Minister mentioned today, don't forget that you can see loads of stuff about climate on the Daily Climate Show here on Sky News, 6:30 and 9:30 every weekday with Anna Jones. Now, still to come on Sky News Breakfast, UK Hospitality is warning more businesses will fail if lockdown restrictions aren't eased in June. They'll talk to us at 7:30 this morning. We'll discuss the scientific evidence behind the warning that the big reopenings in June hangs in the balance with Dr. Zubaida Haque from the independent SAGE Group. That's at 8:05. And at 8:20, we're in Los Angeles as Prince Harry releases his latest TV show on mental health. Now, a charity is making a new appeal for potential stem cell donors to mark World Blood Cancer Day. DKMS tries to find people to give blood and bone marrow, which is used to treat patients, but it says the number of people signing up has fallen by 50% during the pandemic. Jemima Walker reports.
Like other 3-year-olds, Ryan Brissett likes riding his bike and playing football.
You ready?
But unlike most children his age, he has a rare and life-threatening blood disease called CGD.
He's had to have multiple stays in hospital. We stayed in for 6 weeks this year in one turn. He's been on several antifungals, several antibiotics. He's consistently taken medication.
My back is scarred.
Ryan could be totally cured by a blood stem cell transplant, but his mixed ethnicity makes it incredibly hard to find a donor.
There's only 20% of blacks and Asians that register we work with DKMS, and the rest is Caucasian people donating. Obviously Ryan needs a multiracial donor, which hasn't come up yet.
A leading charity says there are 2,000 people every year waiting for a life-saving stem cell donation. But since the pandemic, there's been a 50% drop in people signing up to donate. The charity is calling on certain groups to urgently come forward and register.
Young men, because they tend to make the best donors in terms of certain clinical reasons, and partly due to the number of stem cells that they're able to generate and donate. But also there's a great need for ethnic community donors, because when a patient from an ethnic minority needs a stem cell transplant, they've got a much lower chance of finding a donor.
25-year-old Sam Schmidt is a registered donor. Last year, he was matched with someone, saving the life of a stranger in Canada.
It was amazing to find out I was someone's match. It brings a real sense of responsibility and also sort of worthiness. You're sitting there and you're going, wow, like I'm potentially their only chance. So it's a real opportunity to help somebody.
Sam stresses the procedure of donating is painless and only lasts a few hours. But it can give a fresh chance at life to someone like Ryan.
Do you need a hand?
No, I'm brave.
Jemima Walker, Sky News.
Now, also making the news for you this morning, officials in Tokyo have restarted the Olympic torch relay despite a state of emergency being extended in the city because of the pandemic. An official announcement is expected later and would mean restrictions could be in place until just before the start of the Games in July. President Biden has ordered US intelligence officials to widen their investigation into the original outbreak of COVID-19 in China. He's asked for a report within 90 days, and he said he'll make the findings public. Now, if you're in California, then you could be in for a bit of money. They're offering prizes worth more than $116 million to persuade people to get the coronavirus vaccine. Anyone who who gets the jab, I should say, is entered into a draw where 10 people will each win a prize of at least $1.5 million. Pubs are anticipating selling 21 million fewer pints than normal over the May bank holiday weekend. The British Beer and Pub Association said the lifting of all restrictions next month is essential for the survival of the sector. The number of smokers worldwide has increased, according to new research. The medical journal The Lancet says 1.1 billion people now use tobacco products, with smoking causing more than 7.5 million deaths every year. President Assad will serve a fourth term in office after winning Syria's election with just over 95% of the vote. American and European officials have questioned the legitimacy of the election, claiming it was neither free nor fair. And Marcus Rashford has said it was surreal to get a Zoom call from Barack Obama when he was sitting in his kitchen. The two men arranged to speak through their joint publisher. Mr. Obama praised the footballer for his campaign on child poverty.
Marcus, I think, is way ahead of where I was at 23. I was still trying to figure it out.
If you give someone a helping hand at a young age, they'll go on to do things that, even they didn't think or believe that was achievable.
Love it. Now, you will remember yesterday we spoke to David Lofthouse, who has cerebral palsy. He came on the show with his friend Jasper to talk about their charity walk yesterday. Well, David finished the 5-kilometre walk in just under 10 hours. and he's raised over £18,000 for charity. Good on him. They were really nice boys yesterday, two really good friends doing this together. Really nice to see they've done so well. Now, NATO's Secretary General has told Sky News he believes Russia was involved in the hijacking of a Ryanair plane by the Belarusian government. Jens Stoltenberg was speaking as NATO began its biggest military exercise this year. He was on board Britain's new aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth off Portugal, which is taking part in the operation as part of her maiden deployment. Operation Steadfast Defender involves more than 9,000 troops from more than 20 countries, including exercises in Germany and Romania. Belarus, which has caused significant international concern over the diversion of that Ryanair flight, borders Russia and is just 550 miles from Romania. Our diplomatic correspondent Dominic Waghorn has been on board the HMS Queen Elizabeth and sent this report.
From the Atlantic to the Black Sea, a massive military exercise. NATO launching itself against an imaginary threat, testing its readiness, while its top brass grapple with a very real crisis over Belarus. NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg condemned the forced diversion of the Ryanair passenger plane.
What happened is absolutely unacceptable. And we have seen also a pattern of Russian behavior over the last years.
But did he agree with the British government that Russia was most likely involved too?
I think they are very right to say that, because we know the very close relationship between Russia and Belarus, and therefore it's hard to believe that the regime in Minsk could do something like this without any kind of coordination with Russia.
The comments won't ease tensions in Russia's backyard as thousands of NATO troops exercise in Romania and navies drill in the Black Sea. In the Atlantic, Britain's new aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth is leading the exercise. The aim of Operation Steadfast Defender is to test NATO's ability to deter threats and defend itself. But the exercise is being overshadowed by this challenge from Belarus and possibly Russia to what the alliance stands for. There could be more friction with Russia and its allies as the Queen Elizabeth strike group heads east. From this deck in the Mediterranean, British and American jets will be patrolling the Black Sea, monitoring Russian activity.
We'll always be keeping an eye on it. Horizon scanning is a sort of daily activity for us here, just understanding what the threats are. And we have to be on our guard. I've said to a number of people today, miscalculation is something we have to be really wary of.
Britain's first Sea Lord says Russia needs watching closely.
Russia is looking to demonstrate what it might be able to do to us. Russia's trying to demonstrate where it may be able to threaten NATO interests and values.
It's the Queen Elizabeth's first operational deployment, a challenging debut for her and her crew as they and their 9-vessel strike group embark on a 7-month voyage. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, on HMS Queen Elizabeth.
Now we've got a little bit of space history to possibly bamboozle you this morning. A team of scientists have produced the most detailed map of the distribution of dark matter across the universe. Now, dark matter is not the same as matter, which is what we're all made of and what our world exists of, but actually dark matter makes up the vast majority of everything in space. So it's out there, but weirdly, we don't really know what it is. Its exact composition is still a mystery. But there's lots and lots of it. One day we'll find out. In the meantime, we'll stick to some real matters this morning, like the weather forecast. Morning, Naz.
Good morning. Good news. We've got mostly bright and warm conditions for the bank holiday weekend. Until then, though, a bit of a blip. Cool and cloudy for most places today.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. For this bank holiday weekend, most places will be enjoying brighter and warmer conditions than we've had of late. In fact, on bank holiday Monday, we could see the highest temperature of spring so far on the last day of spring. In fact, for the highest temperature of the year so far. But before that, it is looking quite cool and cloudy for many areas today, for many central and western parts of Britain as well as Ireland. There's cloudy skies, a dull start this morning, quite murky around coastal areas with patchy light rain and drizzle as well. And there's not going to be much change in the story into this afternoon. These areas will stay cloudy, but across the northeast of Scotland, eastern parts of England, there should be some sunshine developing and some warmth, especially warm across parts of the southeast. The odd shower or two may cross eastern areas later, though.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Naz, thank you. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast. Pub bosses say they expect to serve 21 million fewer pints this bank holiday, despite the easing of some restrictions. Details coming up. Hospitality venues, including theatres and nightclubs, are due to reopen on June the 21st. But a few minutes ago, Kwasi Kwarteng said rising levels of infection from new variants of coronavirus means plans won't be confirmed until just before the deadline.
We'll be looking at the data. We've said repeatedly that we won't make a final decision about the 21st of June until the 14th of June, a week before the established date. So I can't guarantee one thing or the other now. I think we just have to look at the data. We've got to be patient. We've got to be very vigilant. People also have to be sensible and observe all the guidelines in terms of face mask wearing, social distancing. And we can't make any call one way or the other today, unfortunately.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Tamara Coben. So data, not dates, effectively.
Yes, absolutely. And that is what Boris Johnson said when he announced the roadmap a few months ago, that you had to leave those 5-week intervals to see where the data was leading. And the difficulty for the government is that there's great excitement about the reopening on June the 21st. People are booking weddings and holidays and buying tickets for concerts and so on. But we won't know until just before that whether it's possible, because as we heard yesterday from the health experts, the number of cases is going up a bit. The number of hospitalisations is going up a bit, and many of those new cases are the Indian variant. Kwasi Kwarteng just told us that the data is a matter of concern, and therefore they cannot guarantee that we can get rid of all social distancing restrictions at the end of June, as the Prime Minister had planned. We've been seeing rumblings of concern for the last few days. Professor Neil Ferguson, who does all the modelling at Imperial College London, he correctly predicted how the Kent variant would pan out, has said that it's quite worrying. Jenny Harries from the UK's Health Security Agency said she agreed that it was worrying, and the next couple of weeks will really tell whether the government can risk that level of opening up at the end of June. We know from all of Dominic Cummings' evidence the other day that we've seen this movie before, and the government do not want to be accused this time of failing to realise that the number of cases was a problem until too late.
OK, Tamara, thank you. Well, let's talk to the Chief Executive of UK Hospitality, Kate Nichols. Good to see you this morning. So, I mean, you're not going to know anything until at least June the 14th. Where does that leave you?
Well, that is quite challenging for businesses. Obviously, we have 25% of hospitality businesses still closed by legislation, and 21st of June is the first date from which they can open. So it is very short in terms of notice, but we do want to make sure that this is the final unlocking, that we don't go back into lockdown. Therefore, we understand the government needs to wait and see the data and get it right. But it is absolutely critical for hospitality as a whole that we do unlock on the 21st of June.
So what happens if we don't?
Well, it will be quite devastating. The businesses that are open and the businesses that are trying to open, they're not operating at a profit at the moment. They're not even breaking even with the social distancing restrictions. So the 21st of June is critical for our pubs, bars, restaurants, hotels, many of whom are still hemorrhaging cash at the moment, even though they're open, and will struggle to remain afloat for much longer. And critically, government support for the sector tapers away and starts to end from the 1st of July. So those businesses will be struggling to stay afloat, and about 1 million jobs will be at risk unless we can get government support extended or those social distancing restrictions lifted. But for those businesses who've yet to open, 15 months of closure with no income at all, this will be devastating for them if we cannot get them open on the 21st of June.
I mean, presumably, if there was a delay in full reopening, you'd be lobbying for, but you would expect, would you, some sort of further financial assistance?
I think you would need to. As I say, the government support tapers away from the 1st of July. Businesses will be forced to choose between paying business rates, their taxes on their property, or paying their people and keeping the business afloat. That's not a position we want our businesses to be in, and it can't be right that after 15 months of closure and heavy restrictions that the government would suddenly cut the industry loose. So we would need to have that extra support extended. Businesses in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland have that breathing space. They have 100% holiday on their business rate until next April. We need parity for English businesses to avoid many of them going bust in very short order as a result of those restrictions continuing. The industry can survive with those restrictions.
I mean, you mentioned that a lot of hospitality is breaking even or not quite breaking even at the moment because of the restrictions and the table service and all that sort of stuff, which does make a big difference. But, I mean, for them at least, because they are pulling in some money and say at best breaking even, that gives them a little bit of flexibility, doesn't it? I mean, believe me, I know it's not a lot, but perhaps a little bit of flexibility.
It's simply not sustainable for the long term. None of these businesses are breaking even. The best that they are doing at the moment is 60% of normal revenue levels. They haven't broken even since last February, when they started to feel the effects of the coronavirus. It isn't sustainable to leave them in that situation for any length of time. Even just a couple of extra weeks will be devastating for many because they've run out of cash. They are existing on fumes at the moment, and the government support, however extensive it has not been enough to cover the costs. The industry was hemorrhaging £500 million a month every month that it was closed.
And yet, as you said at the beginning of this, this has to be a final way out of lockdown, doesn't it? I mean, you can't afford to reopen and shut down again. That just isn't sustainable. So I guess you must appreciate just how difficult this is for the government in coming to these decisions.
We do appreciate how difficult it is. That's why we're pleased that the government is working on data, on evidence, and that we hope that if the data and the evidence isn't in the right situation, they will be evidence-based in their support package for the businesses. This is a difficult situation for the government, for businesses, and for the whole of the country. Then, the mental health and well-being of many millions of people who work in our sector is also a part of this decision. But also we can see from the situation across the country, people are keen to be able to get out, socialise safely again with family and friends, and hospitality provides an important part of that. So we do need to make sure we get this balance right and that we take a decision that's based on economics, health and well-being in the round, as well as just the public health data. And we ought to have cause for optimism because in this situation, unlike last December, unlike last September, and unlike last July when we did reopen hospitality, we have got a vaccine and we've got large proportions of the country vaccinated and therefore protected. So we should be able to take bigger steps this time round, hopefully.
OK, Kate, thank you. Now, it has been a difficult few days for the government since the former Downing Street advisor Dominic Cummings said ministers had fallen disastrously short of the standards that the public has a right to expect during the pandemic. Now, his allegations were serious, no doubt, but are voters actually concerned? Ali Fortescue has been to the Conservative heartland of Colchester in Essex.
Governor likes people, Spencer doesn't.
At the Promenade Petting Zoo in Malden, Essex, they don't often talk politics.
They get about 300 grams of insects a day.
But this week, you don't have to look far to find a view on Dominic Cummings.
To be fair, I think what I know of him from the first lockdown, really, when he was like, everyone stay in, and everyone did abide, and then he went out and done his own little thing with his family. I think he can be a little bit sly in some instances, and I don't think people will trust him, to be honest. And I also think that the job that is being done is actually being quite effective if you look at all the statistics and the figures of how much it has gone down and how well the vaccine's working, and now it's going down to under 30s. I think we're coming quite far as a whole country in dealing with this horrible virus.
What do you think of Dominic Cummings? Do you trust him?
Not really. Seems like a bit of a say something but do the complete opposite. Boris
He's quite an unusual Prime Minister, nothing that we're used to, but he seems to have everything under control.
At the start of the week, polling suggested that just 14% of people trusted Dominic Cummings to tell the truth. But in Tory Colchester, where the Prime Minister came yesterday, there's been some cut-through.
He's got an opinion and he's behind the scenes, and is it true what he's saying? I'd like to know if it's true, because if it is, were we turned over during this lockdown?
Everything is fair in love and politics.
There's not much point in playing a lot of blame game. We are where we are right now, and all we can do is just figure out how to keep it moving.
There is a political weariness here. People want an end to lockdown. They want to leave the pandemic behind. And no one is particularly surprised by the chaos that Dominic Cummings describes at the start of COVID.
Mr. Cummings' verdict may not have landed with everyone here, but a slip-up now could be harder to forgive. As the country strides out of lockdown, future freedom still hangs in the balance. Ali Fortescue, Sky News.
Now, time for the sport with Jackie.
Did you know symptoms of hay fever can develop at any stage of life, not just in childhood? The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Many parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and central and western parts of both Scotland and England will be largely cloudy and cool today, with patchy outbreaks of rain and drizzle. However, eastern areas of the UK will be mainly dry, bright and warm. Pollen levels will be low for most places today, except for East Anglia and South East England, where they will be at a moderate level. Grass pollen season is in its early stage, so some symptoms may occur on sunny days for some people, but oak tree pollen and fungal spores are at medium risk.
The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Now, Matt Hancock has denied lying about protecting care homes from COVID after claims made by the Prime Minister's former aide. The Health Secretary said he did tell Downing Street that all patients sent from hospital to care homes would be tested first, but maintained testing capacity had to be built up before it was possible. Well, let's talk to Robert Kilgour, the Chief Executive of Renaissance Care, which operates 15 homes across Scotland. And what was the situation back in those early days in Scotland, Robert? I mean, were you under the impression that this sort of protective ring was going to be applied to homes in Scotland as well as England?
Well, we hoped, but I think we have to say, first of all, that this was an unprecedented and very difficult situation for everyone, not just us at the front line and all our amazing staff at the front line, but government ministers and the scientists advising the government ministers. So it was an unprecedented situation. But it is a fact. I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, it's a fact that NHS was put first, and sadly, social care came second. That's a fact.
And what's the situation now in terms? I mean, and obviously a lot of what's happening now in terms of guests and all the rest of it coming into homes is driven by the Scottish government. But what situation are you in at the moment?
Well, there's definitely a much better situation now. I mean, thankfully at Renaissance Care, we had started stocking up, with PPE in January 2020. And so we did not run out of PPE at any stage, which is great. But we ran short of some items in our back store, and there was quite a Dunkirk spirit about. We had people driving around picking up PPE from dental surgeries, even nail bars, to restock our back store, if you like. But at the front line, we never ran out of PPE. But yes, I mean, we all made mistakes. Hindsight is, as has been said before, a wonderful thing. But the fact is that we could have done things better looking back, and we could have, we made mistakes. And I certainly made mistakes. We made mistakes at our company, and I know ministers, both in the Scottish government and in the UK government, have made mistakes, and they have admitted that. And that's what an inquiry, whenever that happens, the sooner the better, in my view, that we start an inquiry, because, I mean, yesterday's, not yesterday, but Dominic Cummings' appearance in front of the two committees. I mean, it was a bit like watching a bitter ex sort of vent their views, which was really, in my view, a distraction from the big picture, which is what we should be focusing on.
And in terms of that big picture and how, obviously you want all the administrations across the UK to be better prepared for this moving forward. I mean, who wouldn't? But in terms of what you're doing to better prepare for the future and better prepare for your residents and your staff, what are you putting in place?
Well, we certainly started stocking up in January with PPE. We started staff wearing masks 1st of April, and we locked down our care homes on the 11th of March, 12 days ahead of the government lockdown, both in Scotland and England. It happened on the 23rd of March 2020. And if I have regrets and feeling that we made mistakes, I wish we'd started staff wearing masks on the 1st of March, not the 1st of April. And I wish we'd locked down on at least the 1st of March, not the 11th of March. And government certainly made mistakes, both in Scotland and UK wide, and they've admitted that. And it's not, we're not expecting, what we're looking for is honesty, really. Everybody makes mistakes, but it's about honesty, and that's what we'd really like to see. Hospital discharges without testing was a big mistake, and albeit we didn't have the capacity to do that, and that there was a concern about NHS being overrun. So very, very difficult decisions there. And the other one, which is as important at the care home front, is there was a delay because of the concern from the scientists advising ministers in Scotland and in Westminster that asymptomatic staff in care homes would not be infectious, which obviously turned out to be incorrect. And so there was a slow introduction right across the country of weekly testing of care home staff, which at the front line we've been calling for a long time, but actually it was slow. And in Scotland, it didn't actually happen at the front line till after the first wave was over.
OK, look, we've only got 20 seconds left, but how are your staff coping?
Well, the staff have been absolutely amazing, and thank you for asking. They have been absolutely amazing, and they are the real heroes from this. And in 30 years of being involved in the sector, I've never been prouder of being involved in the sector. They've been absolutely fantastic, and we owe them a huge debt. And I hope that we're certainly intending to do that, and I hope the government don't let down the social care staff, both the Scottish and UK governments. Look after social care staff for the amazing work they've done.
Robert, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.